Sterling, can we see the names of the participants?
You should be able to.
You click on participant, you should be able to. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're a couple minutes out from 7 o'clock. Trying to get all the technology started so we can meet you in Zoom world and also be out there on Facebook Live. So be a couple minutes here while we just kind of let everybody log in. We're doing all right, Sterling, on everything being connected. Lots of different things popping up on the screen, so it looks like we're good.
Yeah, we're live on Facebook.
Fabulous. Well, as we wait to let some more people log in, I'd like to welcome everyone. You can leave comments or questions in the Zoom chat or on Facebook in the comment section. Or if you want to email us, you can email us at programs@albemarlehistory.org. If you have any questions that you can think of during the program and like us to address during the show, you can send it to it in either of those three ways, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. So we've hit 7 o'clock. We still have a few more people coming in here, so fill it up with a few announcements before we get started. So some dates that you can hold on your calendar. Next week on Tuesday, April 12th at 7 p.m., the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society is partnering with the City of Charlottesville's Historic Resources Committee, the UVA Democracy Initiative's Memory Project, Preservation Piedmont, and the Jefferson Madison Regional Library for an event with Dr. Ann Bailey. The topic: Remembering the Victims of Slave Auctions, the Healing of Charlottesville and a New Way Forward. This will be an in-person event in the JMRL Central Library Swanson Room in downtown Charlottesville. You can register to attend in person on the JMRL calendar page. An event will also be live streamed on our Facebook page. So you can check out our Facebook page at the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society and see that live stream in-person hybrid event that is now where we are with what we do. Another event to keep on your calendar: on April 14th, Thursday at 7 p.m., the Historical Society will host Regina Rush for an online program. She is the author of Over the Brick Wall, a genealogical journey to discover my family's roots, published in our magazine, our 2018-2019 double volume. She will discuss in her program the research she has conducted over the past 25 years to trace her ancestors' historical footprints in Central Virginia. So you can register for Regina Rush's program, and I put this in our chat, and I'll post it again on Facebook when I'm done here with this little intro. So we'll have it on our Zoom, and we'll also Facebook that one. And hold the date for Thursday, May 12th at 7 p.m. We will have author and former Montpelier Foundation board member William Lewis, who will discuss his new book, Montpelier Transformed: A Monument to James Madison and its Enslaved Community. So if you've been paying any attention to the news lately, you might want to mark that date, because could be an interesting discussion we have with Bill Lewis. So that's May 12th, 7 p.m. So again, looks like everything is kind of settled in Zoom and Facebook here. Got everyone, oh, still more people coming in here, so trying to admit them. But as we're settling into our Zoom and Facebook seats, thank you all for joining us tonight for our program, Race and Sports, Stories from the Desegregation of Local School Athletics. My name is Tom Chapman. I'm the Executive Director for the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. Thank you all for joining us. We are pleased to share with our local community the signature project that we've been working on, our Race and Sports Oral History Project. Our project is collecting and filming oral histories of individuals who experienced the desegregation of athletics at local high schools and the University of Virginia during the period of massive resistance. Now, I know many of you in the audience were probably looking forward to hearing from Garwin DeBerry and George Foussekis, but unfortunately, both of them are feeling a little bit under the weather and could not join us. So we hope to have them at a future date when they're feeling a little better. They didn't want to join us in the Zoom world. As I understand, they're all fine. It's just they're not feeling very well, so didn't want to put them through a Zoom event. But instead of canceling the program and letting all of you down, with some adept work by our project team, we are happy to get to speak with two-star athletes and prominent members of the Charlottesville community, who have also been important contributors to this project, Kent Merritt and David Sloan. Thank you, Kent and David, for jumping in at the last moment, and Sherry will introduce them in a little bit. But Race and Sports is our big project with an ambitious outcome. We look to gather at least 60 total oral histories from people who lived through this important period in our local history. All of the material gathered from this project will be preserved and presented on an interactive website available to the general public, scholars, and K through 12 educators. Over the past year, we've raised over $150,000 in private donations and grants. So the community has come out to say that this is important for us. We're so thankful for the funding received from the Perry Foundation, the Virginia Humanities, Charlottesville Area Community Foundation, and most recently, the American Historical Association, who is dividing up grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities. We are honored and humbled that the AHA, the largest national professional association for historians, awarded us a $75,000 grant for this project, which is just fabulous. But with fundraising success, so rises our ambitions too. As we continue in this first phase of the project, we're looking to the next phase to create a documentary film that reveals the national importance of our local history. We hope that as you follow our progress on the project, you'll also think about supporting our project in your own way. And I'd like to introduce you to someone in our community who has already taken that step. One of Charlottesville's respected citizens and philanthropists, Wade Tremblay. Wade has been an integral part of our support and advisory team. He has both shared his own recollections of desegregation in an oral history interview for the project and supported us financially to get our project off the ground and to give us the confidence to think big with this community engagement project. So I welcome Wade Tremblay to say a few words. So Wade, unmute yourself if you will.
Thank you, Tom. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you this evening. As I'm good friends with George Gillum. A little over a year ago, George began describing this project and what he hoped to get from it. And we were talking as I was wearing my Perry Foundation hat. And at any rate, it resonated with me and ultimately with the Perry Foundation. I'm pleased to say that we were able to make a grant to help get this project off the ground, which is great. And as been mentioned, I'm personally supportive as well. I'm a Charlottesville native and a history buff, and had the good fortune to be at Lane High School from fall of 1962 to spring of 65. And while I wasn't a varsity athlete, I did have a chance to see that period and experience it, and was able to share some of those recollections, which I've enjoyed and look forward to hearing more. Tom, what else would you like?
That's great, Wade. I appreciate it. No, the Perry Foundation, we came to them and asking for a grant, and then you challenged us with a matching grant. So you put the fire to us, and I'm glad to support that.
That's our usual way of doing things, is we typically offer matching grants. So encouraging organizations like the Historical Society to tap into some of their friends to help with the cause.
Well, our friends came through and we were able to match that. So it's been fabulous working with you on that. And I'm so happy that you're supporting our grant, supporting our project, I'm sorry. Now I'd like to introduce Shelly Murphy. Shelly will say a few words about our project, introduce our Race and Sports project team, and then she's going to lead our discussion with our two special guests. So Shelly, the Zoom podium is all yours.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Welcome everyone to this session called Race in Sports, Stories from the Desegregation of Local Public School Athletics. I currently serve as the Vice President of the Board of the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. Our Executive Director, Tom, has helped us expand the Society's mission to reimagine and reinvent the role of the Historical Society in the 21st century, to be a strong civic organization that embraces in all that we do the diversity of our community, history and experience, and promotes a greater understanding of our past to enlighten the present and foster an inclusive history for future generations. The Race in Sports Project does just that. We are still at a relatively early stage, but have now completed close to 25 of the 60 interviews we planned. Our project leader is Annie Valentine, graduated as a distinguished major in history at UVA. The two lead interviewers are George Gillum and Phyllis Leffler, are historians with lots of interviewing experience through numerous projects. They are both experts in local and Virginia history. We also have a videography for the project, and that individual videographer, and that individual is a Charlottesville native and a filmmaker, and that's Lorenzo Dickinson. Our project spans the years from 1954 to 1974. 1954 was the year the Supreme Court handed down Brown versus the Board of Education, arguing that separate schools were not equal schools in mandating desegregation. But it was not until 1967 in our community when forcible desegregation of high schools was more or less fully underway. In that year, Burley, the high school for Black students in Scottsville, a smaller all-white high school at the time, closed. Those students went to Lane High School, which is now Charlottesville High School, and Albemarle High School. So tonight, we will talk with two very important individuals, Kent and David. We are honored to have you here. So Kent, in his high school years, was known as the fastest man in the state. As early as the 9th grade, he won the state 100-year dash. In high school, he played football, basketball, and ran track at Lane High School from 1967 to 1970. He was one of 4 Black athletes who desegregated football at the University of Virginia in 1970. At UVA, he was on both the football and the track teams, and in 1972, he was named ACC Track Athlete of the Year. A major in economics, he went on into the 1980s to earn his master's from UVA Darden School. He built his career in banking, but ultimately returned to his alma mater to become the administrator of the Department of History. David, a Charlottesville native, and has lived in the area for most of his life. He attended public schools, including Lane High School, from 1970 to 1973, and played varsity football, JV basketball, track, wrestling, baseball, lacrosse, and was even powder puff cheerleader. How's that? At the University of Virginia, where he played lacrosse and football, he received his bachelor's in education in 1977. He spent 21 years in the restaurant business and 21 years in real estate brokerage. Both men were also very active in school clubs and leadership. So our plan this evening is to engage these two men in a conversation for about 30 minutes. Our project leaders may interject from time to time with some follow-up questions. We will leave some time for Q&A at the end and invite you to put your questions in the chat. We will get to as many as we can. So David, I'm going to start with you. How and
Okay.
why are you there?
I'm there. I'm here.
All right, good. How and why did you get interested in sports? Were there things going on in the neighborhood or the community that encouraged you to participate? And what were your first experiences with the racially desegregated sports?
Well, I think my dad probably was the one that had the most influence on getting involved in sports. I think he felt like in his life it had been a great way to keep to stay out of trouble. To have something that you commit to, that you have to work hard for to achieve any level of success. And I think from the get-go, he encouraged me and my brother to participate in football. And of course, in the early to mid 60s, basically your choices were football, basketball, and baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Not as many choices as these kids have today. So I think that was the what started it. So I played organized, and we played a lot of tackle football at Belmont Park. In fact, we used to play other kids from other neighborhoods. The Mead Avenue Park kids would come play. The Ridge Street crew would come play. So we would meet at Belmont Park and play a pretty rough game of tackle football, and that was actually my first true integrated sports experience. Was those tackle football games, probably between 8 and 10, 11 years old, playing the guys from Ridge Street, many who became good friends of mine through junior high school and high school. And to this day, even, I maintain a good friendship with several of them.
Okay. And what about you, Kent? How did you get interested in sports? I'm going to throw the same questions back to you as well.
Okay, well, thank you. As David said, back in the 60s, there were only three sports that were available: basketball, baseball, and football. And we I don't know what really prompted us to get involved, but that's what we did. I mean, we were dedicated to especially football and to a lesser extent baseball, because it was easiest to get together to play football. You could get two or three guys together and go out and play a game. So we were just anxious just to get out of the house and get down there and play, because those were our heroes that we saw on TV back then, and we wanted to emulate them, and we wanted to go out and have fun. They looked as though they were having fun, and they were, and so were we. I mean, we went out. Most of us didn't have any equipment. That was one of our primary Christmas wishes, is to get a helmet. So we were lucky with that. I mean, I guess some of the guys might have CTE, but they don't exhibit it today. But we went out and we played, and we enjoyed it. And we just always naturally, not only football, but we just naturally enjoyed being a part of sports. Mm-hmm. And without knowing it, we developed a lot of camaraderie and a lot of friendships and a lot of long-lasting friendships that were just created normally just from being together and playing sports. So sports is a big part of my life, a big part of my personality, and a big part of my success. So I'm glad I had those experiences at an early age and on through college.
So Kent, was sports a great equalizer? Did being an athlete on a desegregated sports team encourage, a special camaraderie between the different teammates of different races? And if so, what happened off of the field and in the classrooms or other activities, maybe like school dances or something like that?
Well, as far as sports is concerned, the sports are concerned, the thing that you learn probably first and foremost is that the team is the most important thing. So you left the personalities behind when you went on that team field, because basically you were focused on winning, and that didn't allow for a whole lot of rigmarole between each other. Now, the thing that you learned when you got out there, because I mean, we really got to know each other, through sports and football, because we lived on our side of town over and the white kids lived over on their side of town in Belmont, and we really didn't know each other. And we had these preconceived notions about who they were, and they had the same thing about who we were. But when we got together, we found out that we were the same. We just had a different skin color. And the thing that was most important to us was winning. So, because I mean, you felt just as bad, black or white, when you lose. So that became the primary focus on our sports experiences is winning. I mean, we left all the other stuff on the sideline when we had a game. Now, that didn't necessarily translate into school life or social life or anything like that, because one thing that did happen and existed was that, after school and after practice, you went back to segregated neighborhoods. So then your experiences became reality. I mean, back to your reality in essence. It didn't foster types of relationships outside of sports necessarily, or even in the classrooms, to be honest with you, because a lot of the classes were still segregated because perhaps, well, I'm not going to speculate on that, but a lot of my classes were segregated still. So sports was the most equalizing factor during that period of time.
Well, David, I'm sending the same question to you.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah,
sports a great equalizer, and comment pretty much about being an athlete in a desegregated sports team encourage, the field and the classroom, and the same questions that I gave to Kent.
Well, I think one thing to touch on, and I think Kent will agree with me, is that growing up in Charlottesville in the 60s, especially, that was the golden era of football, high school football, Burley, and the great teams Burley put on the field, and the great teams that Lane High School put on the field. Most of you know Tommy Theodosius' teams didn't lose for 58 straight games, or some number like that. And of course, Burley one year was not only undefeated, but they were unscored upon. And so there was an awful lot of community pride. And I think that goes back to what Kent was saying was, the sports available to boys at the time, were football, baseball, and basketball. And there was certainly a great deal of pride in the community in general. And I always felt like it was shared by the Black and white community to have such good football programs. And one, I remember actually being being a young child thinking, golly, Ned, how good would the high school team in Charlottesville be if schools were integrated? If we did have blacks and whites sharing space on the team together. And I think Kent made it clear to me, in one of our previous conversations, because we were teammates at Lane. We weren't teammates at Lane, but of course everybody knew who Kent Merritt was, and everybody knew that grew up as a football player in Charlottesville wanted to play for Lane High School, or if you were black, you probably wanted to play for Burley, and until integration happened, and then you just wanted to play football. And so Kent made it abundantly clear. And I had a very, very, very close friend who was a tremendous three-sport athlete at Lane High School named Richard Shackleford. And Shaq and I were tight. I mean, we were not just teammates on the field, but Shaq came to my house. He spent the night. He was one of our group if we went out looking for trouble during the off season, of course, because we couldn't look for trouble during the season, or Tommy Theodos would probably skin your head and run you until your tongue fell out. But I got to say that, I was a little bit after Kent, but actually, being first year at Virginia when Kent was a fourth year, and getting to know the type of person that Kent was and the type of person that John Rainey and Stanley Land and Harrison Davis, all those guys that were those trend. I don't want to call them a trendsetter, but they really broke the mold, at what had been not only up until 1970 an all white, all male university, public university. They broke the color barrier. At the same time, women were breaking the gender barrier. So that was certainly. And I'm not saying was tuned into it then. When you're coming through high school and college, you're kind of in your own private Idaho. So you're not really paying anything in that much attention to the big picture. It's only since reaching a certain age, I've worked in an industry for 20 years that relied on people of all genders and all colors, and that furthered my whole concept of the fact that we're all people. We're all in this together, and we're all people, and we all bleed red. Well, I got involved with this project, because I want to try and steer. I don't think we're going to turn that big, I don't think we're going to change the course of what has been around for a long, long time. But if you think about Kent and those guys, that was 50 plus years ago. We're making progress, but we have a ways to go. But looking back at it, you were either a football player or you weren't. Didn't make any difference if you were black or white or green or yellow or big or small. If you were out there sweating the same amount of hours per day that everybody else, then you were a member of a team. And I think that's what team sports teaches. You're all in it together.
Okay, thank you for that.
Shelley, can I break in here for just a
Sure.
minute? I am Phyllis Leffler. I'm one of the project leaders. And I wanted to actually ask Kent if I could to follow up on something, because when we did the interview with you, Kent, one of the things you said was that, and this I think is a direct quote from the interview, sports held us together. Going to school coincidentally tugged at the cohesiveness on sports teams. So, I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit in terms of what you felt. You've already said what it felt like to be on the sports team. What did it feel like in the school, in the classrooms, and in your leadership positions at Lane High School?
Sure. The thing that happened back when the schools were fully integrated in 1967 and Burley was closed down and went to Lane is that the kids from Burley came into Lane High School, and whereas they previously they were in charge of their clubs, the presidents of student council, all these other organizations that they were proudly in charge of went into Lane High School, and all of a sudden there was nothing. They were not involved or had nothing. That translated into a lot of friction into, in the day-to-day life in high school. And it wasn't articulated or nor was the administration prepared for that or understood that that was a problem. So that kind of translated itself throughout the entire school as far as animosities towards one another's and classes. I mean, just pervasive throughout your entire school experience. So the team, like I was saying, the team fortunately was able to transcend that, especially at certain times, and go on the football field and be successful. However, we were not nearly as successful in any cohesiveness during the day. There were a lot of confrontations with the administration, with students with each other, because unfortunately, whereas we had an opportunity to meet and get to know folks, from Belmont and whatnot. There were other people that didn't. So, their preconceived notions or their ideas about others, kind of persisted, and it lasted. And they kind of, and that's what you saw. And that was the result of what you saw there. It was just very difficult. I think that, like I was saying, the administration and the teachers were just not prepared. I mean, there were very few teachers that came over from Burley as mentors and administrators that could articulate those types of issues. So it was just a very challenging environment to learn in.
So Kent, what was lost and what was gained with school desegregation? Can you talk a little bit about the impact of the closing of Burley High School in 1967? How did that affect the environment at Lane? Was it like, what was it like being the first Black class president at Lane during those years? And David,
Well,
I have one coming to you too.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I think I kind of, I was alluding to, the environment after Burley closed down and everyone came in my previous comments. I mean, that was our existence.
Right.
I think being the first president of the senior class at Lane, very challenging to me because I had no experience in doing that. I think that folks, including some teachers, I can remember one teacher telling me that I was the worst class president they had ever had. Now, that startled me, but he offered no help
Right.
in making that better. So, just that was a situation whereby, that was trying to, appease or trying to settle down the uncertainty and the turmoil in Lane. But I mean, I had no experience of doing that. And I think that is one of the issues is just people just didn't think things through or offer any help in trying to make that successful. So, it was frustrating in that period for me.
Okay. So David, what was racial environment like at Lane when you came in 1970?
Well, let me back up for just a second. I will say one thing that as Kent was talking that I think he was I think he touched on in an indirect way that certainly has become very apparent to me that coming through that time period, how much people of color had to endure just to get through a day, how much people of color, there was probably some doubt that Kent was probably doing a great job as the president of this class at Lane High School, but might have been the source of the, whoever it was, the teacher that said he was the worst president ever, regardless of how his performance was, just because his skin color was different than that teacher. I'm assuming, Kent, I don't recall having a lot of African-American teachers at Lane High School. I think the environment in Charlottesville and the environment in the country was pretty, it was pretty racially, there was a lot of discontent. You had the civil rights coming out of civil rights. You had Vietnam. You had a lot of things going on at that point in time that, again, just fortunately, because of your age in life, being 14, 15, 16 years old, you were not oblivious to it. You were aware of it, but there was nothing that I ever felt like I could do to help or change or whatever. And I think athletics was an escape for me in that regard, because I didn't have to look at someone as being a racist white person or a racist Black person, which seemed to be a lot of what was going on. And I keep, George shared a book with me that I've just found fascinating about just sort of the segregation, desegregation, and how the path of that in Virginia, how that actually transpired, as opposed to how we were taught it transpired. And maybe that I'm touching on the critical race theory, and I'm touching on some hot topics from the past several years of politics in America and just sort of the overall atmosphere that's out there with regards to race. But you know, the racial environment at Lane High School when I was there, I thought was fairly healthy. We had a lot of integration at all levels of student government, as well as sports, as well as civic clubs and things like that. So I think we were on our way to a better world in the early 70s, quite frankly. And it's been a slow moving effort in many respects, but I certainly didn't. I don't think I noted it. I never really even thought about it until Kent brought it up, and he said, we were teammates, but we would go home to different environments, and never really paid much attention to that fact. Just as if you might not pay attention to someone that goes home to an abusive, situation or whatever. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but it was a very racially charged era. And I think Kent brought up a great point about a lot of teachers and administrators were not prepared for it. I mean, essentially we had been living in two different worlds, and all of a sudden these worlds were thrown together for me in the 5th grade, and so by the time I got to high school, it was for us, it was a little bit more of an, just the facts. I mean, you're going to go to school with all kinds of kids, all kinds of Americans, all kinds of people that of different backgrounds. Anyway,
Okay.
yeah, we made it through, and I think athletics for me played a big part. And I think
Right.
another thing we can't downplay is we look at the idolization of athletes in the society that we have today. And back then, I think because of the success that Lane and Burley had, there was a lot of folks looked up to athletes. And so if you were willing to take on the role of being a leader like Kent did as the president of the class, I think that just said, hey, we can do this. We can coexist with each other, and we can get along, and we can try and understand the worlds that we all live in.
So let's move on a little bit here, David. What was your experience like at UVA on the field, in the class, or in the social setting? Did it differ from your experiences at Lane?
Well, I think a lot, obviously in the classroom and in social settings, it varied a lot. I think through my first couple of years of college, I was pretty much a football player. I mean, I was a student, I went to class, I had good grades, otherwise my mother would tan my hide, even in college. So, academics were always important in our family, and as well as athletics. And so, it was an adjustment that you make, and then, going to school, and I never really thought about the trailblazers that Kent and John and Stan and Harrison were at UVA. I was just privileged to be on a team with them. And then after my second year, or at the second semester, my second year, I ended up joining a fraternity. I got involved in some other student groups that were outside of the realm of athletics, and really changed my perspective on the whole experience at the University of Virginia, because we were not very good in football. It was a totally different experience than what Kent and I both went through at Lane High School, because we were good. We were a good football team, period, but we were not very good at UVA. So but it was just a great experience. I met so many wonderful people, again, of all genders, religions, races. And it was still, just think about it. Think about the early 70s at UVA. There was still a lot of racial turmoil, and there were still, women were at the University of Virginia. How appalling would that be to think about that, that a state university would allow women to come in. I know it's a different time, but I look back at it sometimes now, and I just shake my head and kind of go, what in the world was going on?
Well, Kit, I'm going to throw the same question to you. What was your experience like at UVA on the field or in the classroom, and also the social settings? Was it different for you from your experiences that you had at Lane?
Oh, no question about it. Well, please remember that, the four of us, like David was alluding to, we were the first scholarship African-American athletes at UVA, period.
Yes.
So that was, we didn't really think it was significant personally at the time, but it was.
Mhm.
And we went into an environment where after, I'll say this, before enrolling there, I don't think that any of us had been to a football game at UVA. I know I hadn't. So we were unaware of some of the traditions that existed there now, which meant that after, you scored a touchdown, you played Dixie, and you had this big Confederate flag waved in the stands by some members. I mean, I wasn't used to that, but we knew what that meant. And that was one of the reasons that, I certainly had some apprehensions about going to UVA in the first place. So there was a lot of uncertainty about that. And I also think that the expectations were unreasonable, because I think that they felt that they, meaning not a student body, et cetera, felt that if you got some good African-American athletes, it's going to turn your program around. So they had no concept of team as we had learned in high school. So, when that didn't happen, I think that, I think people got frustrated with that, as evidenced by a couple of incidences that happened, particularly with regard to Harrison and his experience there at UVA during football games. I think that in the classroom, it wasn't as pronounced because, especially first year students, because I think most kids, or a lot of kids, were used to going to integrated, were involved in integrated. I know, on the freshman team, all those kids they were from Ohio and Pennsylvania, not that, all those schools were integrated, but I think they were more accustomed to integration than perhaps people at UVA were. So I think that, there were certain expectations that they had from us that I think were unrealistic. And I think that could have caused a little hard feelings. Now, having said that, going to UV, I have very good friends and long-lasting friends I've known for 50 plus years from the football team and the track team, and just personally. So I think that, the friendships there did develop, but there were also those issues that existed, like David was saying. That was a time of real change in high school. We demonstrated and walked out of high school several times because of voter issues and that sort of thing. And we had voter drives and all that sort of, and Martin Luther King was very instrumental in our lives, as well as Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown, and those types of influences. So, not only did we have these issues regarding integration, but we also had issues with who we were going to align ourselves with. So, there was more. There was a big issue and a time of change that we were going through, and it from when I started elementary school, in fact, through my college days. So we persevered, and I think it made me a better person.
Okay. Well, in your personal lives, and this will be for both of you, and Kent, I'll start off with you. What has been the impact of athletics on relationships across the racial lines for you in your personal life?
Well, I think those things that brought us together as a team kind of is pervasive in my personal life. It's good to hire an athlete because they can get along with anybody. You know, they don't have these preconceived notions about anybody. They know how to get along. They know the success variables as far as making things happen. You're confident in yourselves and your ability to get things done, regardless if it's athletic or otherwise. So I think it's a great experience for anybody, any sport, people to be involved in sports. So I always encourage that because, you learn that concept of team and I can't overstate the importance of that concept in and of itself. So I think that, I think it's very important. I think it's a good experience for anybody. It doesn't have to be athletic. It can be chess team or any type of environment or organization that brings people together for a common good and a common cause.
Okay. So David, the same question to you, and then Phyllis, I'll let you ask the question after that. In your personal life, David, what has been the impact of athletics on the relationships across racial lines?
Well, I think Kent probably said it best. I mean, it just really set the stage for that. There are all types of people from all types of backgrounds, and to come together and play a team sport requires, the ability for you to move past what social norms are, what society says, or what politics say. I had lunch last week with two friends of mine that we went to. One guy and I went to elementary school when they first integrated schools. We went to Clark Elementary School, and then on to Buford Junior High School, and then on to Lane High School. These are lifelong friends. These are two Black guys that didn't play sports, but they followed sports, and they had brothers that played sports, and they had family that followed sports, and they just were sports people. And I would say that our friendship has been fostered by athletics, that we get together now as senior citizens and sit and talk about. In fact, we got together and one of our old teammates on the basketball team at Lane High School just passed away, and it comes back. It impacts you. This guy was a part of your life. Mm-hmm. He was Black. He was Black in a time where being Black was hard as hell, and being Black now still hard, but back then it was hard. And makes you think about what it was like from the time Blacks were emancipated, and how long it took just to get to the point where they could vote. And I don't know how anybody could not be passionate about this topic, and about how athletics really does come into play in relationships between people of different colors and different religions and so forth. For me, it definitely was, and I think athletics still continues to play a major role in the slow machinery, slowly moving machinery of ending racial strife in this country.
Hey, Phyllis?
If we could just go back for one moment to the discussion about UVA. And this question is for David, because I was looking over the interviews that we did in this project earlier today. And David, you said something about when you were on the football team. You said there were not a lot of Blacks on the football team, Black athletes on the football team in your years. And you also said, you used the phrase, which I thought was really intriguing. You said, we were separate but equal. And I think you use that in terms of talking about relationships outside of the sports team. So I wonder if you could just comment on that a little bit.
Well, I think looking back at it again, I think there's so many things going on in your life, and especially if you are a successful athlete, and you are thinking about a lot of things that aren't necessarily relevant to the situation that you find yourself in as you move away from that arena, that environment. And looking back at it, I ended up joining a fraternity, and it was a bunch of really great guys. Guess what? All white, and most of them from private schools. So their background was so totally different from mine. And yet, maybe I just got lucky. The class of '77 in my fraternity house were almost all prep school guys. But they were aware of what was going on, and they I never felt like they harbored any of the a lot of racial overtones of that time. So I don't know if that answers your question, Phyllis.
Yeah, thank you. We seem to have lost you on the screen. I don't know if
But we can still hear you,
we
though.
can hear you exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Somebody.
So before I ask the next question, I want to encourage folks that are attending, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box, and we'll be able to funnel those through. So I've got another question for you too. Where do you feel we are today in terms of race relations? And you're back, David.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Okay,
see you
good.
and hear you. So where do you think we are today with race relations?
Kent, you want to go first?
She asked you.
Oh, she did.
You're on, David.
I'm sure she
Well,
was
speaking of
asking me.
which, you know why my screen disappeared? A guy named Jerome Saylor just called me. We called him Swamp. And he's calling me to tell me about the memorial service for TJ Crawford. I can almost bet you money that was, and I don't know if that caused me to blip out. I think we have come a long way in race relations. I think we have an incredibly long way to go. I think that my empathy and sympathy for again, I don't want to just lump it all into just being for African Americans, but for people of different religions, ethnicities, gender. We've got all of these things, to me, are in the forefront that are going on. There's a lot of moving parts to it, but I think we're having some incredibly intellectual dialogue, and we're learning more and more about, I'm speaking for myself here, learning more and more about the history that I learned when I was coming through the public school system. Was not really history. I mean, some of it was, but most of it was from one group's perspective, and it was primarily white people's perspective. And probably the biggest thing that's come out of this experience with the project you guys have going on, and just reading some of the material that I've been reading, is what extraordinary accomplishments it must, I mean, for Black people and Native American people and women, and for people to have such great accomplishments and overcome the odds. And I just hope we continue to bring those people to the forefront, and for the rest of us to open our minds and our hearts to the fact that we are a team at the end of the day. I'm getting a little sappy for that. I apologize, but I really mean it. We are all human beings sharing this planet and sharing this world, and we all share this country. And I think we've made great strides, but Kent, I don't know where you
It's
are.
your turn, Kent.
But we got a lot ways to go.
Well, to be honest with you, I was very enthusiastic. I was very optimistic about the relationship until these last couple of elections. where race won. Being a racist won, the presidency won. The first thing that Trump said was, the Mexicans are not good people. And then we've got our governor saying that we shall not teach critical race theory. You know, those types of things were winning messages. And that shocked the hell out of me, to be honest with you. So I, you know, even though we are inching along in a positive direction, I think we still have a long way to go. You know, to want to not let people know their history, to keep people ignorant, I think is a very awful thing. And to make that your winning message, I think is abominable. So you know, on the one hand, I think we've come a long way, but we have an awful long way to go.
I think I'm going to agree with both of you gentlemen on that. So I see a couple questions. Tom, would you like me to offer the questions, or you got them? There's one from Eric Wilson.
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Shall I just throw out the questions? I'll make sure as you're working through, if we miss any, we'll try to add.
Okay, because this is the only one I can see. So this question, he's saying to Mr. Merritt, thank you for talking about voter drives, social movements outside the school as an integral to the era and student growth experience. Were those things that teammates ever talked about passively or passionately in the locker room?
I gotta say that no, we didn't. We were focused in on winning football games. We were not political. We were just simply focused on winning, doing your job, and that was it. We didn't let. I think that if we had let that come into the locker room, we probably wouldn't have been as successful. Because I remember one period that there was an effort for, because things are not going well in the school, and there was an effort to get some of the kids not to play on the, you know, in a game, and we resisted that vehemently. But during that time, we lost the game and we tied the game, and so that had an effect on us. But after that, we tried to keep it out of our conversations while playing football.
And there's a follow-up. Caroline is saying she'd like to second Eric's question and add that, is there anything coaches did or should have done to support or discourage any of those conversations if they did happen? And I'll also throw that back over to David after you respond, Kent.
I'd like to just interject quickly that Caroline is my third daughter.
Oh.
I'm glad to see her engaged in this.
Thank you, George. Welcome, Caroline. So, Kent, do you think there would have been something that could have been done if some of those questions, and I know it's kind of focused about in the locker room, but it could also be outside too?
No, I don't think so. I think that most of the conversations were about focusing in on what you needed to do as a team member. And I think that that was probably the best thing to do, is not to get them involved in those extracurricular conversations. Now, I think that perhaps if somebody had an issue, I think they probably would have been supportive, but I don't think that their opinions would have been helpful at that time.
Okay. And David, anything from your locker room per se? Did you hear anything or experience based on the questions that was asked?
I mean, I don't think politics or the State of the Union with regards to race relations ever was a part of locker room talk. You know, it was you show up, get dressed, go out, do your job, come back together, try to get better. And coaches, I think, were focused on that. I think it would have really diluted the purpose of athletics for it to become, a social issue or a race issue. So I think that they did their best just to keep us focused on the task at hand.
Absolutely. Okay. And coming from Facebook, Leanthony Clay Peck, she said, I think about athletes like Colin Kaepernick, Muhammad Ali, John Carlos, and how they were punished for their political positions. Could you comment about then and now and the punishment for their courage?
Well, I could say that Muhammad Ali and John Carlos were one of my idols back during the day. They were outspoken. They were champions, and they stood for what they believed in, and they were excellent athletes. I mean, John Carlos is especially one of my idols as far as running track is concerned. So I think they did a very tremendous job of encouraging and supporting folks. Then through the ages, now they're heroes. And I think that, I do think that the punishment for John Carlos raising the Black Power, that was Black Power back then. And that meant,
right.
That was really an awful thing back then. But I mean, it was what it was. And I think that was a show of defiance to the situation. I think called Kaepernick is an extension of that. And I think they have treated him very unfairly as far as his expression of as far as his protest are concerned. So I think that that hasn't changed a whole lot. I think the punishment is very unfair.
Okay. And did you want to comment, David, at all?
Well, I would just say that, in particular with Muhammad Ali, I can remember, much like Martin Luther King in another whole realm, but I can remember thinking that Muhammad Ali was a fabulous boxer with
he looks like he.
I can remember that at that age thinking that, he was a troublemaker. He was a troublemaker. This guy's got this success going, but that was when I was 13 years old, and since then I look at him in the same way I look at Martin Luther King, who was a troublemaker, John Lewis, a troublemaker. We can go on and on about the Black folks in America that have been troublemakers that weren't troublemakers from a learned perspective, from being enlightened and open to learning these things. I think that you look at Muhammad Ali's athletic achievements, but what bravery it took to say, I'm not going over there to kill a yellow man when you won't give me as a Black man the same privileges as a white man. So anyway, yeah.
I remember that very well. I've got a comment here from Tom Baker. Kent, thanks for being a trailblazer and a role model. I got interested in UVA partially because of your success. Sloan and I became friends at UVA and have remained so. How can Sloaney, myself, and others be real allies moving forward?
Well, I think that David Sloan has been a real ally. I think that he's definitely committed to truth. And I think if you follow his example, that is the way. That is absolutely the way to go. I mean, I'm very proud to know David. And I think he is a genuine human being. So
thank you, Kent. Took me a while to get here, but I'm glad I got it.
Phyllis or George, do you have any follow-up? I don't see any other questions on my end, and then I'll check in with Tom.
I don't have any follow-up, but I'm so glad that Kent and David were part of this program tonight.
Absolutely.
I love the exchanges between the two of you and your honesty and your integrity in speaking truth. So thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
George?
Yes, and yes, indeed.
I agree with everything Phyllis said. I think it's been terrific the way these guys have shown us a lot of things that we didn't know.
Absolutely. I'm going to give it back to you, Tom.
I just wanted to read a couple comments here that have come through. Julia Shields says, my first year of teaching was at Lane in 1967-68. I did not have the good fortune to meet Kent Merritt, but I remember him, not for being a superb athlete, but mainly for always being a gentleman. So you've definitely impacted people. A number of
Absolutely.
asking and saying thank you for all this. And let's see, there was one in here. Oh, David Mattern. Thank you, Mr. Merritt, for your honesty and straight talk. As a high school athlete and a football player in your time, I cannot imagine what you went through in your years. So, but yeah, just a number of people saying thank you and appreciating this program. And I myself definitely appreciate the two of you stepping in on short notice. When we learned that Garwin and George were not feeling too well, and we're going to have them back later in our sometime this year, maybe in a couple months, when it gets warm, the pollen gets out of the air and all the things that make us not feel good are going away. But really appreciate you all stepping in, and you all are very well spoken, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any more questions that have come through, but definitely lots of people expressing their appreciations. This is brought to you by the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. We are so happy that Wade Tremblay would join us tonight, also with Kent Merritt and David Sloan. I want to thank the team of Annie Valentine and George Gilliam and Phyllis Leffler, and not to forget Lorenzo Dickerson, who is our videographer and overall just good guy. He's kind of like, I joke with him, he's like 7 degrees of Albemarle. It's like I ask him about somebody, he's like, oh, I know somebody related to somebody and I'll get you. But anyway, so brought to you today by Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. Thank you very much for supporting our Race and Sports project. We hope to have many more of these programs to let you know what we're doing in the community and how you can support us and how you can participate. If you have a story to share, please get in touch with us, and we'd love to add you to what we're doing. So I'm Tom Chapman with Shelly Murphy, who's been a great moderator tonight. Thank you for joining, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right.